Auth66, day 8. I actually already recorded a video for today. I don't know if YouTube's going to show it, but I'll end up deleting it anyway. I decided instead of talking about what I was going to talk about, which was processes, I'm actually going to talk about part of my talk that I gave at MSP Geek. And I think after yesterday, it feels more important to talk about. And it's kind of random, but going to events sometimes can be amazing, positive experiences for me. And yesterday definitely was a positive experience. But it did have something that happened that I did actually talk to another owner of an MSP about, that's a female, that made me want to bring that to my Auth66 today. I had somebody introduce themselves to me and ask if I was in marketing. And there's nothing wrong with marketing. I, tip my hat to everybody who works in it, whether they be male or female. But it is definitely a connotation at a technical event or for technical people that perhaps the woman that they're speaking to could only be in marketing. And in my talk, was about culture, but it was really about how to align your culture with being inclusive and having a diverse workforce. I talked about being able to call things out. And here I was in this scenario, and I didn't really call that person out. I probably should have, but I didn't really have that comfort. But I've certainly done so in the past because language matters, right? I mean, it doesn't seem like much to ask somebody if they're in marketing. But in the same breath, assuming something about somebody can be harmful in ways that you don't anticipate, right? I mean, we've all been told, if you see, a woman who has a larger belly, don't ask her how many months along she is, because you shouldn't assume she's pregnant, right? But people do it all the time anyway, right? We have a culture of allowance where we've allowed people to say things. And then in the same breath, we've also created this culture where people feel the need to stand up and rage when somebody does something small. And I think really it probably just needs to be a conversation. I'd actually like to tip my hat off, and I'm going to leave the person's name out of it, but they'll know who they are if they watch this video, which I don't think they will, but if they do, nonetheless. They used language with me, and the language referred to business and to businesses being big boy businesses. And, it was one of those things where I laughed, but I had the trust to be able to immediately correct that language. And I said, I think you mean grown-up business, correct? Right? Because businesses that are successful can be run by, men or women or whatever your gender identification is. And they immediately realized, and were like, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it like that. And I'm like, I know they didn't mean it like that. But another piece that I talked about in my talk was like the intention versus impact. That person did not intend to minimize me. They did not intend to marginalize women's place in the industry. But it doesn't mean that when we use language like that it doesn't do that, that it would only assume that businesses that are successful and working properly are run by men, right? And it's small little things like that can make someone feel marginalized. That can be like, if you are at a technical event, you must only be there in sales or marketing, right? It's small things that communicate where someone belongs. And I see all sorts of little small interactions that happen on the daily. And I don't think we're ever going to be perfect. I think what we could get better at, though, is having conversations about it, where we could be able to be honest and forthright about, hey, that, maybe that hurt my feelings, and not be immediately offended that somebody else might have been hurt, because that wasn't our intention. But the impact was still something that had a negative effect on somebody else. And personally, I'd rather know if I've accidentally done something to contribute to someone's negative feelings. It doesn't mean that it's within my control to fix it or make it better, but maybe I could learn a lesson for next time. Maybe I could change my language. Maybe there's context that I could apply, or even if I have the power to be able to make change based on, what they're upset about. I think, we've gotten to this place where it may be a little too, I don't want to say selfish, because that's not the right word, but we might be listening to our own internal monologue maybe a little too much. And I think while we need to be a guide and protective of ourselves, I think we also need to be cognizant that it's okay to receive feedback from outside in the world and be like, you know, I don't agree with it, but I can hear you, and there might be a lesson in here for me, or I could see how you could feel that way, and that sucks, and I don't love that for you, right? Because I don't want you to feel that way. You know, I could say something to one of my children that hurts them, that you know, was something necessary to say as a parent, but they could still tell me that they were hurt by it, and we can have a conversation about that. I think, you know, the one of the driving points I wanted to say was, like, in our workplaces, in our lives, there is so much that we could be upset about or internalize and create into something way bigger than maybe it should be, or that it could be. Ignore the barking dogs. But if we had a conversation, if we could talk through it, then, you know, the person might be able to get the information that they need in order to feel better. You know, if Jane said to Joe, you know, I can't believe she looked at me this way, maybe you weren't even looking at Jane, maybe you were looking at something else entirely, and, you know, Jane now thinks that you hate her and is going to look at the lens of everything through that. But instead of that, what if Jane had turned and looked at you and said, are you okay? You just looked at me kind of funny. Did I say something to upset you? And you went, no, I saw something weird outside. It could be done right there, right? Our brains and our insecurities and our fears sometimes lie to us and tell us that something was done on purpose to hurt us. And it's just not that way. If I assume that the person who said big boy business was trying to make me feel small, I mean, that would pretty much ruin my ability to work with them, right? I think I talked a lot about grace in my talk, and I talked a lot about how if we could assume that people were coming from the best intentions, how would we behave, right? We would probably just be looking to educate them and to think about, you know, where we could bridge the divide, because ultimately we don't really want to be separated as people. We want to find understanding and common ground. And I think if I could pile all of the three things that I talked about together, the common ground and understanding and grace would be like the three words I would say which should come out of it. I'll probably talk a couple more times on the stuff I covered in my talk, because I think it's super important that we get to this place where we're less divided. I don't want to be political on my LinkedIn, and I'm not really looking to talk about specific politics, but I think in this day and age where we have sound bites and we have, you know, hard-hitting, like, clickbait headlines to try and draw on our attention, and everybody's fighting for attention that way, it's very easy to fall into the trap of being an extreme. And I think it's much harder to find consensus and to build something that has, you know, agreement across people who don't always agree eye to eye. And I think that's still important, though, right? Democracy, politics, those are words that we attach to what happens in government buildings, but these are also things that exist in everyday life. You know, they're the ability to find common ground and be able to agree on what to do moving forward. And I think that's important. And if anything, you know, even if you don't agree with all of the politics, you know, that might fall under the stuff that I was talking about, one thing that we can probably all agree on is that we don't wake up in the morning set to hurt somebody or to cause them any pain, right? But if you knew that you were doing something that was, and that you could make a small adjustment, you probably would. And I think if we leave politics out of that, that's something that we can all agree on. Now, what does that look like, and what are we comfortable with ourselves doing in order to contribute to that? I mean, that's for each person to decide. But at least if we listen and we take it in, then we can always be working on being better. Because realistically, until we die, there's always something to learn. There's always some facet where we could be better. Small shout out today to Jonathan from Ninja for getting me my dinosaur shirt. Super appreciate that. Had to dedicate a small little bit to you. Anyway, everybody go out there and be kind. Treat other people with grace. Have a great day.